everyone.
Oh, there we go. Perfect.
Easy.
Oh, selfie.
Sitting in the good. In the right
Yeah,
order.
I think so. Yes, we are.
All right. Can you hear me? Yes. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. I'm Nina Walsh, Global Leader for Industry. Can't talk. Global Leader for Industry Specialist Business Development.
It's because your
at
title's so enormous and
AWS.
impressive. That's why.
It's a pleasure to be here this afternoon. I hope that you've enjoyed the session so far, and we have another cracker for you coming up now. No pressure to my guests. Before I joined AWS, I spent over a decade in visual effects and animation, and so it is my absolute pleasure to host this session today with our wonderful guests, Felicity Staunton, Gretchen Libby, and Andrew Galka. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Nina.
There's undoubtedly industry-wide disruption going on at the moment, impacting all of media and entertainment, and you've heard multiple sessions about that today already. So we're going to take a slightly different look at that from the visual effects and animation perspective, which goes through constant disruption, it feels like, over the years, which we're going to jump into. But to kick things off, first of all, just a little icebreaker question. Work from home, how do you feel about it?
I'm not the best person to ask. I'd rather be in bed. So I do not enjoy going into the office anymore.
Okay.
I mean,
Anymore.
I
So you
have to.
done?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, we try to. So we try and do 3 days a week. I usually am there like a day and a half, if I'm being really honest. I'm sorry, my assistant's in the audience as well going, yeah, go to the office. So it's, but yeah, it's interesting. Our whole office has like a very, very different points of view on where we should be. So yeah, I'm team couch at home.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, if it's okay, I'll just give a little background on me because it's my relevance to this panel. I joined AWS as Director of Visual Computing 2.5 years ago, but before that, I was 24 years at Industrial Light and Magic, which is the division of Lucasfilm. So I was making visual effects for the film industry. I think that the work from home that has happened during the pandemic actually worked really well for families, right? So many people got to spend more time with their families in ways that we couldn't have probably dreamed of. I think now I like to, and I have a global team now at AWS spread around the world from Europe through to Asia. I appreciate it for them now too. And our team actually doesn't have a mandate to go back to the office, and I support that. And I think that is very healthy at this time. There are reasons to go to the office, but I support whoever can stay home if it makes sense for them and their families.
Andrew?
Yeah, I like work from home. I like the opportunities it brings to us. I also like working in the office, and I really miss the whole camaraderie that you have in a visual effects studio. Just getting people together and actually problem solving together is actually really a thing that's been hard to replicate working from home. But at the same time, I really enjoy the flexibility it provides me specifically as well, that I can go back to Australia and work when I'm based here in LA. That's really powerful, and I think it really enables a lot of our best minds to still stay engaged with the company and not have to take all that leave and be so far away from everyone else and still contribute to what we're doing. And to do it on their time as well, I think that's a really powerful thing.
Yeah. All right. Felicity, working in animation development and production, how have things changed for you with the current environment and industry disruption that's going on?
What's the current environment? You know, what's going on?
There's a lot going on. Where do we start?
So I will just address the elephant in the room here. So we're Animalogic. We have a studio that we've had for 35 plus years, which has now been acquired by Netflix. So my part of the company is the production company. So we're very much like focused, you know, on packaging and putting films together. And like our day to day is working with talent, you know, and they are kind of our North Stars, our writers, our directors. And it's a really tough time. I mean, we're very lucky in animation in the fact that the strike hasn't affected us to the same extent that it has the rest of the industry. A lot of our writers don't work under the WGA, they work under TAG and IATSE. But as time goes on, I think what are we, day 100 now?
Yeah.
Yes, as time goes on, there's a lot more, you know, writers, directors, you know, stepping out in solidarity as well and just saying we're not going to do this. Even though we can, we won't. So it sucks. It really sucks. And I think that, like I said, we've been protected from it to this point, but I think it's an important thing that's happening right now. Yeah.
And from an animation perspective, animation is a very collaborative process innately. So how has that been impacted?
Well, as I said, we haven't had the same kind of shutdowns that live action has experienced. But I think that I'm also have to, remind everybody here, and I think for all of us on the panel, that, sometimes we're talking about ourselves and sometimes we're talking about the companies that we're working for as well. And it's a really weird time. It's not just the writer's strike that's happening. It's also the influence of AI and how that is starting to affect the way that we develop. And the way that the talent that we work with want to develop as well. And at this point, we don't want to fence it, for too much longer, but I feel like we're still in a very interesting, like very kind of nebulous sort of phase. And the way that it affects us at the very, very kind of early end of creation is kind of difficult to grapple with, because a lot of the time, you're dealing with people who are coming to you hopefully with really personal stories that they want to turn into something bigger and want to turn into a film.
The pitch process itself must have changed.
It has, absolutely. And it sort of goes hand in hand with, you've got studios wanting more content that is very specific, from very diverse voices. The days of plug and playing a director or a writer into something that a bunch of producers decided was commercial, I think are gone, which is great. But I think with something like, use Midjourney as an example, it is actually giving some additional flexibility to, people like directors who are coming in and going, like, we don't have the creative skills that, an entire art department would provide us. So it is giving them ability to kind of pull things out of their head in a different way, which has been kind of interesting to see. But I feel like for us, it kind of has to stop there. It's like, it's great to express a point of view, but I'm not sure that it's something that, for us anyway, as a production company, that we really want to be with, like, down the line. Excuse me.
Language.
Sorry, guys. She's Australian, so.
They all are.
Yeah, right.
I know.
Not me.
I've assembled an all-Australian panel and an honorary Australian panel. Thanks, Gretchen.
Yeah, another Aussie dropped out, so I'm the filler. I'm the filler.
Yeah.
And Andrew, what about from a visual effects post-production perspective, industry-wise and recent changes and what's going on?
I feel like the last 3 years has just been like completely, like since COVID started, like there's been so much change. Like we went through that first incarnation of like, what the heck do we do when COVID hit? And then I think it was amazing how everyone could come together and suddenly make work from home work where it never used to work beforehand. That was pretty exciting. And I feel like we're just like stumbling from one big event to the next one. The generative AI.
Stumbling is such a good word.
Yeah, it totally is. Like, I don't think anyone's planned out how to deal with any of this from the start. It's really testing the waters and finding out what you can do with things. And the first one, work from home with video conferencing, like Zoom, that was nothing back then. Then moving to the AI stuff, and then finally into this strike. And the interesting thing, some of those points with the strikes that are going on at the moment, is starting to look at the ethics of AI and how that's used in the creative processes. And we actually, like, at least at Company 3, we've spent a lot of time thinking about generative art specifically. And there's always like different voices at the table. Everyone's, there's some people that are really for it. So like our creative directors, they find as a tool, because generative AI is not magic, but just as another tool in their toolbox, they can communicate with the clients better, and the clients can come at us with ideas, and they kind of baked, and then hand it off to the creative directors who specialize in actually bringing those ideas into reality. So that's an interesting use of it. We're a services providing company, so there's a lot of automation opportunities for us, and shifting away from that hype cycle of saying AI can do anything. And I can't remember who said it earlier, but in one of the panels before, there was like a whole list of things. and it was like, we can do all this with AI, but most of it's just automation that you could do like years ago. I had the same conversations like with everyone in my company, the colorists, the visual effects people, and most of the stuff they rattle off is just regular automation. But the generative art stuff is it's not a problem for us, but it's going to take a little while to work out how we can use it. And I think most of our conversations, like everyone wants to use AI because it makes things faster. The iteration speeds are a lot quicker. But then we always get back to the ethics issue and linking it back to the strikes at the moment. Like it's all about using AI and how it can replace humans and human creativity. And I think this is the right time. I know there's a lot of like, the strike's hard to deal with at the moment because there's a lot of issues, but just forcing the ethics issue to come up, I think that's probably a good thing that's coming out of the strike.
Yeah, the responsible angle.
Yeah, because I guess generative AI is definitely the Wild West at the moment. And we've had these conversations internally where it's like, if we don't start using it, our competitors will. And we're always, as a leadership group, trying to say, well, where's the line? We don't want to cross this line because our company is built on artists and creativity. We really strongly believe that artists are the creative output. They drive that innovation, not a computer software, basically. So we talk about this a lot. And I think there's going to be a lot to learn still.
Yeah,
It's going to take a long time to get to actually work out what we're going to do with it.
Yeah, and Gretchen, I'm going to go to you. You touched on you'd been at ILM for 24 years, but you've been in the industry for a touch longer than that.
Yep.
In your time and in your experience in the industry, tell us about how you've ridden that wave of disruption, hence the title.
Yeah, well, I mean, I first would call out, and we talked there were several panels this morning about virtual production, but that's been a massive transformation for this industry and huge opportunities, flipping creativity on its head in terms of making decisions first early in the pipeline, because you have to make your backgrounds or your plates before you shoot them. And so that's been amazing, and I think opened up lots of opportunities for different types of roles, especially the real-time component of that. Lots to learn there still. I mean, I was at ILM. One of the first movies I did was Star Wars Episode 2, and it was one of the early big blockbuster movies shot on HD. And so if you could imagine, I mean, back then we had a model shop. And so I remember the model leads coming in screaming that the detail was way too much and they never had to make their models this much detailed before. Same thing happened with our CG models. And, I think, of course, we did away with our film out and scanning department at ILM. And so, those jobs became different jobs, right? Matte painters used to paint on glass. Not when I was there, that was well before my time. But
just to be clear,
matte painters used to paint on glass, and then many of them transferred to become digital matte artists. Not everyone made the cut. Same thing with miniature model builders, did the same thing. And we've seen, lots of change. It's always for the better. I mean, everybody hates it at the time, and, everybody gets worried about what it will mean, but it usually means opportunities, and a lot of times efficiencies, budget savings, schedule shorteners in some cases, and that's great because then you can, really focus on putting your money on the screen, right? And really, that's what everybody wants, is to hire the bar creatively while staying within budget and on schedule.
Just no mean feat doing that. Felicity, from that global talent perspective, Andrew kind of touched on it there from a working remotely perspective, but from your perspective in development, how has this sort of increased your access to talent that perhaps you didn't have before?
I think it has to a degree. I think, again, development is such in a weird way, it can be quite an insular process. It's literally me, my producing partner, and just the writer often, just, spending hours at a time trying to work something out. And so in that sense, I probably shouldn't be the one saying I should be working from home, because that experience of like sitting down with somebody and having that, that kind of creative one-on-one has always been kind of beautiful. But if I project down down the timeline for our productions, we have something that's just about to come out of story. And when it comes to hiring talent, like it's just been like a complete shift. Like we have story artists working all over the world. You know, we're not, you know, while the studio was an Australian company, we always kind of prided ourselves on the fact that we had talent from all over the world existing. I mean, I think at one point, you probably know the stat from Animal, like how many different languages were being spoken at Animal at one point. Like it was crazy. But people had to physically be in the space, and it was beautiful culturally to have that. But at the same time, we're finding now that it's giving us flexibility to front end our projects here in Los Angeles, so we as the producers can be close to them. A lot of the times our directors and writers are here as well. But then it also means it's so seamless for us to work with Vancouver or work with Sydney, and again, with artists all over the world. And I think it's just gotten better. Like, you know, one of the things that, you know, has been very kind of consistent across our slate of films is that we've worked with a lot of live action directors that are moving into animation for the first time. And so everyone from like George Miller in the early days to Zack Snyder to Will Gluck and now Ron Howard. And, you know, most of these guys haven't worked in animation before. And we've just seen each project, it's become easier and easier and easier for them to kind of understand the process, but also for us to integrate them when you've got someone like Ron who is in LA for a day and then off in New York and then shooting a movie. And, you know, once upon a time, it meant if there was no director in studio, it was kind of tough. Like the mood shifted, it was just harder to get things done. You really had to rely on that director unit in a different way. So as the years have gone on, like, you know, looking at the difference between, say, how we did the Lego movie, which was, you know, very much like a remote collaboration, through to then what we did with Peter Rabbit, where you had Gluck up in LA for good long stints. It was kind of magic. It was really nice. And then it gave us the ability to access the talent that we really wanted and that really wanted to work on the project versus, well, who's just rolling off something and, you know, we can feel it. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly.
Perfect segue to the technology side of it, Andrew, which I know you're passionate about. But all of that seamlessness that Felicity was talking about is obviously enabled by the tech.
Yeah. I was actually thinking while you're talking about that, like one big shift that we've had with partners like AWS and that kind of thing is the democratization of those enabling technologies. So when I started my career in Sydney with Method Studios, which was owned by Deluxe at the time, I think we had a sound stage, and it was like one of our selling points was remote sessions. But we had to have this huge infrastructure that Deluxe was paying like enormous amounts of money through to actually do it. And the last since AWS has become a lot more common, suddenly anyone can do that. And that kind of also speaks to getting access to that bigger talent base, being able to collaborate across our studios a lot more, that kind of thing. So that's definitely one big shift that we've seen, like everyone's seen. It's not unique to us. And then, like during COVID, we could hire anyone from anywhere. And it was actually quite amazing how, I remember artists when they were in the studio, they were very sensitive to latency. So if something, like they used to paint with like a tablet. And if it didn't appear on the screen like within a millisecond, they're like, oh my God, it can't work. And then COVID happened, and they're suddenly like working from Dubai to a machine over here, and latency is no longer an issue. So like people's tolerance obviously shift because they worked out they could work from home and still
How's the cultural side of that worked as well? Because it is technology, but it's also the cultural, you know, influencing getting everyone on board to working in a new way.
Yeah, right. Well, I can speak like. I lead a team of developers who write the software that artists use and connect all the pieces together. And while if you're established in the industry, it's really easy to do things. But I think visual effects especially has always been like a mentorship-driven industry. So you have people coming in, taking the most boring jobs, rotoscoping, for example, which is now being automated. But that aside, we're kind of losing that mentorship touch, and it's a lot harder to do that. So I'm a big fan of young, new career, like early career talent. I really love that you can shape their minds and really help them grow into the area that they want to grow into. And that is a lot harder with workforces that are separated. So I think my approach there is starting to like group people in geographic areas so that they can still work from home, but it's easy for them to get together and connect. And I think it's really a balance in the end, right? It's technology never replaces anything, but it helps us collaborate better and things like that.
Yeah. And Gretchen, I'm keen to hear your perspectives from your visual effects life and now your AWS life as well.
Sure. Well, I was global head of production at ILM in my last role there, but one of my prior roles was to help with expansion of the company globally. And so we had opened ILM Singapore in 2005, Vancouver 2012, London 2014, and then now there's Sydney and Mumbai they just opened. So I struggled a lot with the visual effects supervisors and animation soups who were like, well, I can't talk to someone who's not next door or in my office, right? I can't do a proper review. It has to be at my desk. And so that was a big, Aaron will remember, that was a big thing we had to overcome because people were really set in their ways. But nowadays, you have many of these large companies that have global footprints. And there was one point where we wanted to buy one of these big walls. I can't remember, I think HP made it. And it was a live, always on wall that you could walk by. Do you remember that? Yeah. And we thought that would be a way to bring everybody together. And we didn't end up doing it because we were like, unless you stop and talk, it's really just somebody walking by. But we did buddy systems. We built little groups of people to collaborate and build those relationships across borders, which was amazing. Now I do have a global team from London through Canada, US, and down to Japan and Australia. And same thing, everybody knows Amazon leadership principle about frugality. This year is a very special year in that regard, and we are, trying to limit travel. So this week has been amazing for my teams to come here to SIGGRAPH and get together as a global team. But regardless, we do, weekly meetings, and we really push hard to, make everybody stay as connected as possible. And I, honestly, from the VFX business, it has largely been a nomadic business. People would finish a job in Vancouver, have to move to Montreal for the next gig. So disruptive. I love the fact that now people can move home. Like a lot of Aussies moved home. And exactly. And so I think that's been a benefit. I hope that will continue.
Yeah. So thinking about the disruption cycle, Felicity, and from your perspective, how has it impacted the buyers, the viewers, that side of things?
You said buyers, is that what you just said?
Buyers.
Yeah. It's the accent. So. I was trying to say buyers, Buyers.
Appetite of buyers.
The appetite of buyers. Again, I think animation is very lucky that we do get protected from a lot of these things. But I mean, just in terms of the trends that we're seeing, everybody's looking to replicate, the success of things like Mitchell's vs. the Machines, Spider-Verse, anything that has like a visual, very clear visual difference. But as I mentioned before, I think that, really what people are looking for are, our personal stories, are things that writers and directors are very much, connected to in a real way. And, again, just being able to be anywhere and being able to access talent from anywhere has really helped with that, because it's kind of a privilege to live in Los Angeles. It's not, particularly if you're an up and coming writer or director, you're probably not here yet, and so just being able to use, video conferencing and just even just kind of anecdotally, I found during the pandemic that writers, a lot of writers are like introverts, right? And so they're expected to perform to, panels of people who are these big decision makers at the studios, and even having to deal with us sometimes. It's it's a grind. You've got to come into the office, you've got to sit there, you're in there for hours, you're presenting. It's like a dog and pony. Exactly.
Yeah.
Is that an Australian thing as well? Dog and pony show.
Dog and pony show. No.
US.
Does that translate?
US. Oh yeah, it translates.
Good.
Bonza.
That doesn't translate.
But it actually was kind of amazing to see these people who, did have a little bit more of that protection of the screen, and so they still had to perform, they still had to do their thing, but it wasn't as intimidating. And we saw a lot of people that, maybe in previous years just wouldn't have broken through, not because they didn't have a great story, not because they weren't incredibly talented, but it's just purely because that's a really intimidating thing to do. And I think over time, like giving them that exposure and kind of like gentle experience has really helped. Like we sold a lot of things through the pandemic. We were, things were great. And I think a lot of people that, maybe weren't those big, loud voices actually got more opportunity in a lot of ways as well.
Did you find the other way where the screen was like a barrier to people and you just couldn't connect with them? Because I know you were saying they try to sell personal stories, right? But it can also work the other way, where it's kind of...
I didn't, and you know what? It's funny. Even now, like we're slowly starting to push back to in-person pitching, but it doesn't happen that often. Like people prefer. Like I have meetings, or no names, but like I have meetings with studios, and they'll just be on different floors of the building, but they won't actually just even get into the room together. Whoa. I've been in the building where I've been on level 4 and other execs have been on like 6 and 7. It's like, should we be sitting together? And they're like, oh no, it's fine. We'll just do it. We'll just do it this way. Wow. So it's it didn't have, I think, again, like just from our process point of view, it didn't seem to be a barrier. I mean, it's always lovely to be able to do things in person, but it was also a massive grind. Like you'd take a pitch out years ago, you'd have to schedule 2 weeks, you'd have to back things up hard up against each other. You'd have to take all of this crap with you. You'd have art and you'd have assistants like dragging stuff around and setting up rooms, and people would be late and things would cancel, and it was a massive waste of time. And now we do those same things, really quickly and really efficiently.
Yep. Well, I can ask you about from a visual effects perspective, Andrew, Gretchen.
You can start.
Well, I might need the question again.
No, that's okay.
That's why I said that.
Looking at that was his angle. Yeah, no. Looking at that disruption cycle that we've got going on in media and entertainment, and then from the perspective of the visual effects industry, studios working in the cloud and on.
Yeah, I think, part of what attracted me to coming to AWS, I had a really long, beautiful career at ILM, but the innovation that happens at AWS and the enablement of industries that didn't really have, an outlet before, customers who wanted to start their own company but couldn't afford the infrastructure to build an on-set, an on-prem data center. We have customers like Untold Studios and Outpost VFX, both in the UK, who are fully 100% studio in the cloud. And that enables them, there's certain, risks that come with that, of course, but that enables them to, really flex muscles in other creative ways. Their IT department is consistently not worrying about infrastructure. They're worrying about what cool tools they can build for their artists. And so, I see that, and, at ILM for years, we kept pushing our IT team, when are we going to the cloud? That was mostly about, we were running out of capacity, and we have to, at the time, you couldn't rent storage, you had to buy it. But then your CapEx budget was fixed for the year, so that was a problem. And then we could rent render procs, but that was also, costly. And so it just, it was frustrating. And so for me to have the chance to come here and then, say it back to the industry, like what a benefit it is. The other part of it that's really exciting is sustainability. And, AWS in particular has, our climate pledge and, carbon footprint promise. But our data centers are more efficient and are greener. And imagine, all the data centers that exist right now in any industry, and kind of compiling them all into, more clustered, greener locations is just a huge win. And we're very committed to that, and I talk about it a lot.
One of the, I guess with unlimited compute power that we have available on cloud has its other problems for us more practically, and that is all of our producers expect to be able to just use unlimited calls all the time. And that doesn't really align with our business goals most of the time either, because you've got a budget to work to. Yeah. All the budgets are shrinking, so our clients come to us and cry poor. But then our compute cost is 30% of that budget, for example. And then people start, because they can iterate and there's no cap on what you can actually push through the render farm. They just want to do everything without thinking about the cost. And that's a real problem for us. One of my colleagues, Jason, who's in the audience, yesterday was telling me back at in Disney Animation, they used to final a shot on just one frame in some cases because they had to think about exactly what they could render. Yeah. And those days are well and truly gone, especially with the, like I said, unlimited capacity that we have here.
I still think you can make people run on 5s and 10s and limit what priorities are, right? I mean,
Well,
maybe
when
not your artists.
well, when they know they can do whatever they like
Yeah.
they can really iterate and push those creative boundaries. They want to do that,
Right.
and it's really great. It's really great that we can do that.
Yeah.
That's exciting. So
And do you think the relationship between production teams and technology teams has got a bit closer
oh yeah, big time.
as a result of?
Yeah. So I actually shared my office with our managing director for Method LA, and we're constantly bouncing ideas off each other because like technology is such an enabler, and that's why I really was excited about joining a visual effects firm back like 10 years ago now. I came from like a traditional IT background, and then like just that intersection of creativity and technology being required to deliver that really excited me, and that still is very true today.
How do you control the production teams when, as you touched on, like they've got, big demands, and we deal with it with lots of different customers as well, but how do you sort of communicate with them without it being too dangerous where they want everything?
I think just being honest and having that upfront conversation that like what you're asking for is very expensive and we're a business and we need to deliver something that keeps you employed and keeps all these mouths fed. People start to they resonate with that because they understand their role within that bigger context. But it's really great just being able to hit those delivery targets or hit that extra taking up a notch by just using all that, having access to those, to that compute and GPUs and things like that.
And Gretchen, looking at real-time production and the explosion of that as well, talk to us about the disruptive but also, I guess, innovative side of that on the industry.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's been amazing that Epic has, done the Epic Fellowship to train, because at ILM we opened a division called ILM X Lab some years ago, and I think it's called ILM Immersive now. I think they just changed their name, and we were doing like Vader Immortal and different VR experiences, largely marketing driven. It wasn't really financial then, but it was really hard for us to find artists that understood Unreal, the Unreal Engine, and I don't know much about Unity, but probably the same thing. So that's been a real shift, is getting these tools in the hands of the artists. Again, virtual production's been a big driver for that as well, but that's also really transforming the industry, telling stories in, and using those real-time tools, again, to your point about iterations, really can help, focus on the creative and once you know the tech. But I think, of course, one of the, potential blockers is it isn't limitless capacity from a GPU perspective, for example, and AI/ML is doing a big job on taking up the world's GPU capacity. So that will hopefully balance out at some point soon, and AWS is building new silicon that can help service the AI/ML industry. But I just think, again, it's a mentality shift too, right? We used to say, if we were working, I think, Aaron, you did this on Jurassic World, where our schedule was getting really squeezed, and the director just wasn't finaling shots. And so Aaron had to go and show him, you're going to have to review 300 shots a day on this pace in order to final this movie on time, right? And you just don't miss a delivery date, so that wasn't an option. But I think that some of this technology is going to help that. The creative process still does take time, right? You got to check your story, have your audience screenings, and really make sure that you have a good project on your hands. But I think, again, it's a tool, right? And I think it opens new doors and new opportunities.
And like speaking on that about the generative art stuff specifically, you said not being able to final a shot. Like in our experiments with like Midjourney and that kind of thing, the creative control of the actual result is actually really difficult to achieve. And so I just want to loop it back to that.
Right.
The creative, the generative art's not going to replace anything. It's going to be another tool. And I picked up on that word where you said tool. And for that reason is the creative control is not there. And we know our clients like Marvel, they like to nitpick every tiny little thing in that shot. And being able to do that is really something that an artist specializes in, and moving that further out to our color division our colorists we're in the business of relationships more than we are actually producing images in the end. It's really being able to manage the director's expectations and help them find what they're looking for without them knowing what it is. So, yeah, I just wanted to
Magic.
loop that around.
Well, I think the Gen AI is a good first pass. It maybe concept art, storyboards, a script, right? But it's but it's always going to need an artist to touch it and make it final.
Yeah.
Can I just add
yeah,
as well?
please.
It's been interesting talking to, so we still kind of access our big art department back in Sydney a lot, and it's interesting to see the difference between the point of view of a production designer or an art director versus maybe a character designer, in engaging with the tech, something like Midjourney, where I find that, an art director, like a friend of mine's like, I just love this. I'm having so much fun. It's basically what I do every day anyway. It's like I'm being instructive and I'm hoping that I get the right thing back. But yet on the flip side of that, you've also got people going, well, you're getting what I create for you for free, basically. So it's definitely, there definitely feels like there's a divide even within the companies, right? Where certain people are using it in different ways
100%.
and they're being affected in different ways as well. Yeah.
Well, few minutes left. Andrew, top predictions for the industry for 2024?
Well, we're going to get past the strikes. So then it'll be like this massive ramp up to actually delivering all this new content. So that's definitely going to be a challenge, but it's not like a prediction. I feel like we're going to start to get really settled about how we can actually start to use generative art. Just like the journey we've gone through with virtual production and working out what works on a stage and those LED volumes and what doesn't work. The same kind of shift's going to happen in this space. We'll probably get some legal battles about like the generative art things specifically. Like no one wants to be first to actually be involved in a legal case about that to actually push the bounds. But I hope that happens sooner rather than later, just to start to cement where we can start to use that technology a bit further. But yeah, I think it's going to be much around the machine learning AI kind of work.
Yeah. And Felicity, what about from your perspective?
Well, like you said, I'm hoping that things are wrapped up when it comes to the strike, and I think that there's definitely, I hope so anyway, that that the writers are, and actors and everybody else that's gonna get involved are kind of being respected, I guess, for the work they do. I certainly cannot do what I do. Our company does not exist without the creatives that bring us, the inside of their souls and break it open and say, let's turn this into a thing. And I think that goes for everything right down the line, So I do think that there's a hill to climb here, but I'm hoping that will be resolved next year and people are feeling good. I'm kind of excited on the tech side. We're starting to look at, how can we work outside of a traditional studio model. We're dealing with these massive films that are $80, $100, $150 million. And it's like, they're also really slow. The project we're working on right now has been in development for 8 or 9 years,
Oh, wow.
and we are now in the first year of story. And that's great. That's just the nature of these types of movies. But I'm really excited to look at, ideas that feel nimble, that feel really fresh, that we can actually get out really quickly by utilizing things like real-time engines. And it also gives us hopefully a little bit more control, over the finished product. Like a slightly smaller team, something that we can get up really, really quickly. And even if it is just for online delivery, for social media, for YouTube, I think that sort of thing, being able to create it at a bit more of a clip is exciting for us, alongside of the 10-year extravagances,
The investment of
as well.
time and
Exactly.
energy and love.
Exactly.
And Gretchen, what
Yes.
about from your perspective?
Yes, well, first of all, I think 2024, when productions can come back online and finish shooting, we're going to see a massive tidal wave of demand for visual effects capacity and animation globally. Much like during the pandemic, when people were having a hard time getting talent, I think we might see that in spades next year. I also think, I'm really excited, it's funny, I was on the floor at SIGGRAPH this week, which was a much smaller floor than years past, but I saw TikTok had a booth. So I thought that was quite interesting, and I feel like the democratization of technology will continue, and people having access to not only tools, but like how to tell a story and learning how to create content. I think that's going to continue. I personally watch a lot of content globally. Like I love Indian cinema and I love Brazilian cinema and all kinds of things, and I learn a lot. So I think that's going to continue to converge, I hope. And again, and the last thing I would say is, of course, the Apple Vision Pro was announced and will come online, I guess, end of this year, early next. And I can't wait to see what opportunities that brings for storytelling. I know maybe not right away, but any product that Apple releases usually has a pretty big impact.
Yeah. Well, in our industry, the disruption is constant, from the creative to the technology to whatever the audience is wanting to see. So thank you very much. We'll continue to ride the wave as we have done for many years. Thank you so much to our wonderful panellists for the session. Thank you.